another 15 minutes. Laid out the same way, got a revision history in the front of it. This is the IQ. This isn't with everything. The GP is with every single document. This is just for the initial qualification. So when you first get a brand new unit, or if it's a unit that gets moved, an IQ needs to be performed on it. As you see as we get into it, it's basically a checklist. It'll talk about what we're doing here, and then it'll talk about, and then it'll have the areas where you can actually document. This is the IQ procedure, objective scope, and it gets into what you're going to do. This talks about what we're going to do with this qualification, what it does. What's great about this is we can skip all this because I can come back to it. You get into the actual executables. Here's where the data gets into. See the procedure number listed right here? That procedure number is the same as when you go back into the document. So if you're unclear what you're supposed to do, i.e. measurement of vent space, adequate space should be available, it has the dimensions written down there. So you're supposed to take a tape measure and measure, I would think, it says adequate space should be available. How would you figure out? Well, it says 4.1.1 right here. You go back in the document. .1.1, it tells you exactly what to do to perform the procedure. So that's what's great about these documents that that Distek that makes for everybody, is there's no getting lost. If you're not sure about something, you can always go back and the procedure is laid out. It tells you how to do it. I.e. in this case, it talks about taking a flexible metal tape measure to measure the depth of the vent space that's available. And of course, it has the measurements right here, and available, not available, comments. So again, you can't get lost, and that's true of any procedure we have in our documents. They're all listed right here. As you go through them, you can just go back in the document, and it'll tell you how to do it in the procedure section of it, and you document it in the folio section of it. Mechanical load, electrical load, site cleaning, level check on the bench, vibration atop there. This doesn't have a pass-fail, it just has you write down what the actual measurement is. That's that vibration, the non-specified number. Location of all packages, visual inspection. So as you can see, most of this is just a checklist. Yes or no? There's really no getting lost on it. Very few actual things have to be done other than measuring the space, voltage, and everything else is a checklist. Installing it. This is for the 2100. Just a matter of going through it, installing it, inspecting the leveling feet and water bath supports, inspecting the water bath insulation, filling it up, making sure everything settles, rebalancing everything and make sure that it's all nice and level again. We can't really go through a 2100 unless I can find one before you guys leave this week, but we'll look at the 2500 and we'll apply what this is to the 2500. There's not a lot of differences. It's a water bath. It's got an acrylic bath. It's got a thermocirculator hooked up to it. Typically when you get a new one or a moved one, in your case you're not going to get a new 2100, but maybe it's a purchase one off of eBay, or maybe they purchased something off of another website, or maybe they got it from another laboratory, it's going to move to their laboratory. You're basically just going to take the unit, fill it up, let it settle down again. Once it's filled up because it takes 22 liters of water to fill up a bath. Once you've filled up the bath, you're going to re-level it again. That's leveling the dry plate. You want to make sure that it's nice and level again. Inspecting the dry post for oil residue, inspecting the hold down clips, level check of the unit, verification of the height adjustment. Vessel clips break a lot on the 2100, so that's one thing to be cognizant of. I carry lots of them with me. Spill checklist, verifying the driver, motor, startup. No measurements. Everything's just a checklist. Basically just going through it. I know this is all drive. I'm just trying to give you the outline of how these all work. Preventive maintenance. Again, same setup as before. Got a revision history, table of contents, Basically, it's got the same things before, procedure, which talks about how to do it, and the executable, which has where you annotate the actual data. Same thing as before, 4.11, all the way down through the end of it. So if you get lost on any particular part of the procedure, you simply go back and reread the procedure, and it'll explain to you how to go through doing it. It's not overly complicated. For anybody who's going to be working on the 2100, we're going to pull the 2500 apart. But checking, I'll go through this real quick, just so you guys have a little outline of it. Checking the water bath. Just inspecting the bath to make sure it's fine, there's no cracks. When they say checking the water bath, they're talking about the acrylic bath itself. You want to make sure that it's not cracked, not falling apart, not warping too much. It needs to be staying in a rectangular form. They tend to, as they get older, the 2100s, start to get a little bit, with 37 degrees water having ran through it over the ages, tend to get a little bit warped, meaning a little bit, they're more pliable in the middle. And there's a clip in the back and a clip in the front, and if it's not being held together, it could actually slip out of the clip and start getting a little bit wider. When it starts to get wider, it has a tendency to pull down, looking down at it. Looking down at it, when it starts to get, there's actually a clip in the back, a little plate back here, that holds the bath in. And then there's a one in the front also that actually can be twisted down, top and bottom. So that needs to be twisted out of the way in order to pull the bath out whenever you do. And there's feet on the bottom of the bath, 4 locations. We have the same setup on that one back there also. Those things need to be twisted downward, and it allows the acrylic bath to be lowered a little bit, and it can be pulled out when this is slid up out of the way. But what happens is it pops off of this clip right here. As this gets older, it has a tendency to bow out here, the plexiglass. So you got to pay attention to the bath itself. Once it starts doing that, it can start forming cracks, stress cracks in the glass. So when you're looking at it from the side, you'll start to see some stress cracks come down in here. These fine little lines start to get out here where the bowing action starts happening at. Something to look out for when they're talking about inspecting the bath. Check hoses and replace if required. Hoses are hoses. They're the same on any bath that you use. They get hard, they get cracking, they break. They get very dirty when you don't pay attention to them, when people don't use algicides, when they don't. Whenever I'm working on a bath system, I always pull the hoses off and clean them with a wire brush, or I should say a hard bristle brush. Try to get all the algae out of them. They get discolored over time. There's not really a lot I can offer other than if you don't like the way they look, change them. The customer doesn't like the way they look. If they want to pay for it, change it. That's on you guys. Check the clips, fittings, and connections. Distek uses hard plastic fittings for the 5/8 inch and the 3/4 inch tubing that we use. They have a tendency to get brittle with heat and age. They break sometimes, so you want to replace them. Keep a healthy dose of those around. If you're not using our clips, you're using something else, whatever you use, bring with you. Again, I know how it is out in the field. I've seen everybody use different ones. I don't know what you use wherever you go from. I'm not saying you have to buy from us, wherever you get your clips from. Bring a lot of clips that have a tendency to break. Same thing with the fittings and connections. They're talking about just like the T-fittings and anything else that you see on any of the water baths. Make sure you have a couple of with you. I like carrying one of everything with me. It's in the back of my van. If I have to fly someplace, I can only take limited resources with me. You can't take one of everything when you go there. Clips are something you should have with you all the time on 2100s. Clips and the vessel hold-down clips that actually hold it down. That's later on in here. Clean and reposition the filter. I clean and reposition the filter on every bath that I work on. I'm going to give you guys something before you leave here. It's very easy to make. Once I give it to you, you're going to look at it and go, man, I should have used that years ago, because I don't think anybody here probably used it. Most of the people that work here at Distek never used it until I showed them. I have a little piece of tubing that has a plug in one end of it. I use that to plug up the bath every time I'm gonna work on it. And I'm gonna show you how to do that later on this week when we work, well, tomorrow actually, when we work on one of the baths. I can clean the filter on that bath without emptying the water out of it. I only empty water out of a bath if I have to, if it's nasty, dirty, and it's filled with algae. I typically will clean the inside of the bath. I'll wipe it off, it's got a thin layer of whatever is in there, and then clean it, you know, as much as I can, and then I'll clean out the tubing. But I rarely empty the water unless I absolutely have to, unless it's been sitting in there for decades and it's nasty and dirty and smells of algae and everything else. I usually just end up wiping it down and cleaning it. And I'm going to show you guys how to do it. I'm going to give you guys this little piece of tubing to use on how to do it. And when I show it to you, you guys will be amazed that you didn't think of something like this before. But I'm going to have you do that. I clean and reposition the filter on everything. The 2100Cs and above have the inline filter like you see on the unit back there. The 2100Bs and before that had the center evacuation point, and it has a filter that sat over that hole in the middle of the bath. I'll show you how to clean both of those. Alignment and seal of the water bath, that's that foam that goes around the top of it. And if it gets moldy, it has a tendency to get moldy, dirty, nasty. It's simply a razor blade, you scrape it all off. It's a double-sided tape, you peel and stick it back up on there and put the foam back around the top half of the bath. It goes on the top edge, up here of the bath, all around the outside edge of it. So you guys know what I'm talking about on the baths? The foam? You guys are getting all this, right? It's not like going too quick or...
No.
You grasping some of this? Yeah. Make sure. I talk fast, I'm just how I am, I'm sorry. Drain valve check, you basically just making sure that it drains out the drain, it's not plugged of anything of any nature, checking it out. Checking for flows and leaks, flow must be proper and there should be no leaks from any fittings. Basically we turn it on, let it circulate inside there should be no leaks. That's all you're really checking for. Switching off the TCS has to be turned off and then back on again just to make sure that it's working properly. It should turn off and it should turn right back on with no problem. Inspect the vessel centering rings. That's the yellow ring that goes around the vessels. You only see them on bath units. In fact, I got one back here.
But you always send them.
You always send them?
Yeah. I never have been ordered before bath units, but
Yeah.
I always receive them.
All our vessels are the same, our premier vessels. And this is the vessel centering ring. This goes on our bath units. So I need to inspect it. I typically clean it. It's like you get a little ring of mold around it sometimes. I typically clean it. Make sure that it's sitting in good repair, good order. Inspect the vessel. The vessel must be in good condition. No cracks, no visible nicks or dings in it from something dropping into it. Some people drop paddle blades, especially when it's empty and the paddle blade drops from like about this height up here and falls down. It can break. I've seen them break through the bottom of it before. I've seen them put a little splinter in the bottom of it before. Just inspecting. Some labs use some cracked ones up on the top. I'm not so worried about that. If they're okay using it, I'll use it. I'm more concerned with any cracks or scratches down on the bottom, because if I'm going to do any kind of chemical testing, that could impact whether it passes or fails. So my main concern, even though you do look at the outside, that can be grounds for changing it if it's cracked out here. But I typically, if it's cracked and they're using it already that way, I don't mind, I don't care. My only concern is down inside here, making sure there's no cracks, no chips, anything of that nature. Vessel covers and plugs, you know how they are. They crack, they break, they got to replace sometimes. Inspect the shafts, make sure the shafts look okay from the naked eye. We're actually going to do measurements later when you do shaft verticality to ensure that the shaft it's fine. You're gonna do sintering also. That'll further show you that the shaft is fine. But from a visual standpoint, the integrity looks good. Doesn't have any nicks in it, any scratches, real hard scratches. And if it's any kind of a coated shaft, you wanna make sure the coating's not nicked and scratched up too terrible. Some of them get Teflon coatings, some get other kind of plastic coatings that are put on them, so you may, it's up to whenever I find anything, before I write it down that it fails, like right here, it has satisfactory and has an unsatisfactory. If I put unsatisfactory, that's gonna raise eyebrows. Somebody's gonna want to answer, somebody's gonna want you to write down, why is it unsatisfactory? So before I write anything down, if I find something amiss, like if I was to find a scratch in the bottom of this vessel here, the first thing I do is I go to the customer and I'm like, excuse me, I said, not just anybody in the lab, I actually go to my contact in the laboratory, somebody who has authority, and say, this has a scratch in it, do you have another one that I can replace it with? And if you don't, then maybe we can order one, because that will affect my chemical testing later on. Or if it was something like a shaft that was nicked or scratched, you're gonna bring it to their attention. Always allow them the opportunity to do what they want. They're like, oh, that's fine. They're paying you to do a qualification. And they're not paying me to pass it, but they're paying me to do a qualification. I would like to pass it, but I need some guidance sometimes, and I'll usually go to the customer since they're the ones that are paying me to do what I need to do. So always leave it with them. Besides, later on, when they go, how come you left that scratch? I wrote down that it was scratched, and you said it was okay. You could always use that aspect if you wanted to. I've always done that. Cover your ass. That's how I'm a big believer of covering my own butt. I don't want to get in trouble for nothing, so I'll write it down. Inspect the baskets. Again, baskets are baskets. And a lot of what I'm going through right now applies to all the units that we're going to work on. But I'm talking with you about the 2100 for you guys that want the 2100. I'm going to put 2100 down on all your shift here, kids. But it looks like a little cylinder. It needs to look like a little cylinder. It needs to be true. It needs to look like, sometimes you'll get one that's off kilter. You'll see the bottom of it is a little off kilter from the top. And when it rolls, you'll see that it rolls oblong. If it rolls straight, it's good. If you see it oscillating as it's rolling, I usually use a flat surface. I roll it across a flat surface. If you really want to eyeball it, you can look along the edge here as it's rotating and see if you see any abnormalities. You want to make sure that it's fine, that it's working fine. Another thing too is to feel. Make sure there's no spurs, no pieces of the metal have turned upward. Because any little tiny piece of metal that's hanging off of this, that's spinning around in the media, is impacting the testing. And that's not a good basket. They would need to replace it. So you want to make sure that it's nice and smooth and it feels fine to the touch. Inspect the shaft collars. 2100 had two different types of shaft collars. One was the round circular metal that had the Allen key in it. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
That type. And there's also another one that has a round circular device that has a screw that goes into it with a black head on it. You need to inspect those and make sure they're in good working order. It needs to be intact. This was written for the 2100, so when they talk about shaft collars must be intact, they're actually referring to the second one with the screw with the black head on it. A lot of times those old type ones, that screw part broke off. The black part of it would break off. It was just a piece of metal in there, which is actually, when the black pieces broke off, is an Allen head, and you couldn't tighten it down unless you had like a pair of vice grips or something, or pliers. That's how you got to tighten it down, and that's, you don't want the laboratory.
That it's happening constantly on the adjuvant and variants.
Yeah. Breaks. Anything, any hard plastic on the device, I mean, that's not a lot of things. We've done it ourselves as designers of the bass. But a lot of people out in the world just don't really get or understand until you start working on these things for a number of years. It's hot, it's 37 degrees, and all that heat is rising all the time. And all that heat, over time, is making everything above it that's made of plastic brittle. It gets old and it gets brittle and has a tendency to start breaking whenever you start applying any kind of force to it. So always bear in mind that anything on that bath that's sitting above it where it's getting heated all the time is susceptible to that.
It's just happening with women, because if you tell them to screw it lightly, then they will screw it till the water gets out of the threads.
Yep.
And if you say screw it hard, then it's vice versa.
It's the way it happens with all the customers. Again, most of the time they don't listen. They have to learn the hard way. 2 more pages and then we'll call lunch. I think he's taking you guys out. Inspect the hold down clips on the vessel support plate, that's what I was talking about. The clips that twist over, got the same kind on the ones back there, but I'll show you them again. Just make sure they're in good working order. If they have a tendency to break, especially on older 2100s, there's two different kinds of vessel clips. We have the regular plastic ones that you guys are probably familiar with on the 20, and we're talking about the 2100. That looks like this. And it's got a big plastic screw that goes through the middle of it. This is what goes down the hole, and I think there's two black rings right here. This is your regular hold down clip. This is how they are, most of them now, and that's all the ones we have for replacing now. But back in the old days, they had the same type of clip here, but the middle piece was made of a different plastic, and it had a piece of metal with threads on it, and it was plastic coated going through the middle here. They break all the time. They used to break all the time. And they're a pain to get out of the unit. You can drill them out if you want to. I tend to not drill out broken clips. I tend to get a pick, and I'll play with it for 5 or 10 minutes and keep picking at the plastic and keep pulling it out of there, and then I'll retap the screw through the thread holes. Because if you use a drill and you drill down through it, sometimes you'll chip the threads inside there. Then you're screwed, because then the clips that you're going to put down inside there, they don't fit anymore. Now the hole's bigger, and those vessel clips won't fit in there no more. So then you're going to have to start figuring out putting. Some people I've seen put like plumber's tape around it, try and hold it in there. Anything you put in there after you've made the hole too big is just looking to fall back out again. So I tend to not use a drill. I'm not telling you not to use a drill. Some of my technicians here in the States here use a drill. I prefer to, when this breaks off, that's what's left down inside there, I just get a pick. And I'll pick at it. And if I have to, I'll get a pick and put it on top of there, and I'll just keep tapping at it until I break the plastic breaks apart after a while. And you just keep picking at it until you get enough of it out of there, get the plastic pushed out of there, and then retap it. I got a thread, it's the same thread, that I'll retap it and put it in there, and it usually works fine. It may take you 5 or 10 minutes, it is what it is. I know the kids nowadays want to get done quick and fast, so they want to get a drill. You do it however you want to do it, I'm just giving you some advice. If you make the hole bigger, in the long run, it's going to be a harder job to do. Check the verification of the height adjustment spacer. 2100 had two different kinds. The kind you guys are used to on the side that twist up and down. They say paddles on one side, baskets on the other. And then the old 2100s had them on the shafts in the back. They were mounted to the plate where the guideposts are at. And they had one on this side for baskets and one on this side for paddles. So the 2100 has two different kinds. Those had a tendency to break a lot. And they have the same kind of, I wish we had one in the back I could show you. They have the same kind of the hinge on it. It's the same hinge for vessel covers. You know what the hinge I'm talking about that's on the vessel covers? That hinge is the same one that's on the 2100. So if you have any of those hinges, you might want to hang on to them and use them on the 2100, old model 2100s. Those are good things to have. Check the adjusting the idlers. Idler wheels can be adjusted on any of the bass, 2100 especially. You have to pull the lid off. There's 8 screws, 4 on each side that hold the lid on the 2100. The 8 screws come off, the lid just pulls right off. You have access to the whole belt system, all the idler wheels. Everything can be adjusted right there. So check and make sure the idlers are adjusted properly. Inspect the dry belts and make sure they're in good repair. You guys have worked on all kinds of bass. You guys know how belts look, how they have a tendency to crack. Make sure they're lubed properly. I put a thin layer of vacuum grease on the belt. I'll usually run it about 150 RPM. I'll get a glove, put some thin vacuum grease, the clear grease that we use, and lube up the belt as it's going around. The reason being is heat rises. That heat is rising, it's making that belt nice and brittle. Over time, it's going to crack, it's going to break, pieces of it are going to chip off. I'm sure you pulled the lids off of our units and seen black all inside there. That's pieces of the belt breaking off. If you lube it up, it helps to make it remain pliable. Doesn't have to be adjusted as many times, and will last a lot longer. Again, because that heat is rising and it's just drying it out. So every 6 months when you do a qualification, I always put a nice little thin layer of it back on there again. Check and lubricate dry posts. Same thing, thin layer of 3-in-1 oil. Some of our bass that have brake systems, it'll say do not lube that side, the guideposts, so like 5100s, but in 2100s, both guideposts can be oiled. Check the release lock on the driver assembly to make sure that it's working fine. Checking hydraulic actuator. That hydraulic actuator is the black hole in the back that actually holds it up, so that if you let it go, it doesn't fall and slam down on anything. Make sure that's in good repair. There's no easy answer to that, except that if you ever have to change one, it's hard. It's usually not, I've changed them before. It's hard to do it as a one-man operation, preferably with two people, somebody giving you a hand with it. I've done it myself as a one person, but it's, the hard part about that is holding it up and getting the screw back in there, and the screw has a series of washers that have to go on the inside of where the screw is going, and it's, trust me, if you ever have to do one, you're gonna wish you had somebody helping you. Checking the magnetic pickup. If it's working, don't fix it. It's working fine. Again, if it spins properly at the proper RPM, it's working fine. It doesn't need to be checked. But you can check it. There's actual gap that can be adjusted on it. And it actually has it in the documentation. I can pull back up in here. It says it in there what the gap needs to be set to. But if it's working, you don't need to worry about it. Check integrity of the cables in the rear. Just make sure that everything's back there. The wires are not frayed, broke. Clean the drive head area and close the cover. Wipe everything down as you can. I usually throw a little bit of methanol on a paper towel. Wipe down as much of the old grease that I can off of the black pieces I saw everywhere. And that's it. And the TCS, self-explanatory. Check and lubricate the internal pump. On the newer ones, you don't have to lube it, so it can just be checked. You could write down if you want to that you did not lube it because it was not required. But on TCS, it's 0200Cs. Lubing is not required. It's a self-lubricating pump. But it looks the same, but on Bs and As, you actually have to put a little bit of drop of 3-in-1 oil inside it. But you'll figure it out if you see them. But that's what it's referring to. Inspect the internal fittings, make sure nothing's broke, everything looks like it's attached properly. Check the integrity of the external thermometer probe, make sure that it's plugged in fine. On the 2100, it had a tendency on the TCS to where the temperature probe plugs in. That likes to break a lot, that connector. It's a plastic thing that goes on the back of it. It's a bad setup, but it's all we have right now. But the front goes through the metal in the front of the TCS, and on the back, with the wires, it comes out of a tube. This is the front of the TCS, and here's your fitting. This is where the TCS plugs into. Behind it, it goes through the hole there. This is made of metal, and it has your wires coming out that go to a board. 2 wires plug into a board down here. That's what plugs into the board. There's a plastic piece that goes around the outside of this that's threaded, and that's what holds it down. That plastic piece likes to crack. It looks like this. It'll get a crack in the middle of it, and then it doesn't thread down all the way. That breaks a lot. You can pull the pins out of this. You push them in, pull the pins out separately, pull that plastic piece off and replace it if you need to. A lot of people in the field like to take black electrical tape and wrap it around this and tighten it back down again. It seems to hold. You do whatever you have to do. If you have one with you, replace it. If you don't have one with you, maybe take it off, a little drop of super glue, wrap it with some black electrical tape, tighten it back down again. It seems to work sometimes. If you're pressed for time, if you need some help. Check the temperature setting, knob settings for functionality, integrity of all electrical connections and components. Clean the TCS interior and close. I usually hit it with a little blast of compressed air. I usually carry a can with me. And that's the PM on the 2100. You guys ready for lunch? You bored yet? Everybody tired? Take a nap? Trying to get through it. I just want you guys to know what we're talking about.